I'm Elyse Archer. I'm the founder and CEO of She Sells, and you can catch me on this week's episode of The Jesse T Show.
Elyse Archer, what is going on, sister?
Jesse, I'm so excited to be here. And it's even though we're not live together, it's also cool to be hanging out with someone who's kind of my neighbor.
Right.
We just
realized we're
found out.
neighbors. Yeah. Hell yeah. We're like 20 minutes apart in terms of like where we live, which is really cool.
Very cool. Very cool.
Well, thank you so much for joining the show. And I'm definitely excited. We have a common connection that saw fit to plug us in together. And ever since we started connecting, it's just been a beautiful conversation and just excited to see where the journey leads. So for those of us, give them a sneak peek to what we've been talking about. Who are you? What do you do? And tell us all about all things Elyse.
Yeah, totally. Well, I'm thrilled to be here. And I think what I do today would not indicate a lot of where I came from. So I've founded my own company in the sales and wealth creation space for women. But before that, it was an interesting journey to get here, as it is for everyone, right? So I'll give a little context. So growing up, I loved all things beauty, and I wanted to be a makeup artist for years and years. And I loved doing my makeup and my younger sisters and just pouring through beauty magazines from a really young age. But the problem was I never looked like any of the women that I saw in those magazines. And for anyone who grew up around the time I did, it was like early 90s. And so, body positivity movement hadn't started yet. And so if you were the description of beauty at that point was, stick thin, gorgeous supermodels. And so I started early on comparing myself to them. And I never felt as beautiful. I never felt pretty enough. Then, throw in some dance classes with some other girls where I was a little like thicker than them and comparing myself to my younger sister who was just naturally thin. And I didn't realize that I was setting myself up for decades of really, really hating my body and being super disconnected from it. And this does all tie in with what I do now. So I'll share that. But there was a moment, I don't know about you, Jesse, but I think we've all kind of had those moments where it's like, it was a make or break type of moment. And I remember my family had just gotten back from a trip to Paris. I was in my early teens. We'd just gotten back from a trip to Paris. And, aside from there being baguettes on every street corner in Paris, you also walk a lot. And so I ended up losing a little bit of weight on the trip. And I remember we were sitting as a family around the dinner table one night after getting back from this trip. And growing up, my dad and I are good friends now, and he's a dear part of my life. But he just wasn't, I didn't get the attention from him that I desired as a young girl. We'll say that. And I remember wanting so desperately to have his attention and for him to see me. And I remember that night, he looked at me at the dinner table and he said one thing that was literally just meant to be a compliment, but it changed my life. And he said, "You look good." That was it. "You look good."
Wow.
And from my dad, this man who I so desperately had wanted attention from growing up, that I felt like he saw me for the first time. And then I started I kind of took that. So my teenage brain took that to mean the smaller I get, the more worthy of love I am. Then I can get what I want. Then I can get the attention and affection I want. Go to school, start getting attention from the boys, start getting it from the girls, like everyone. And so I started that in that moment, that kicked off what would turn into a 17-year journey of an eating disorder, of hating my body and then trying so hard to fit into these molds that society says will make you happy. And so along the way, I went into sales because I'd also picked up the messaging that to be happy and to have that life, I needed to make a lot of money. And so sales was the best route I could think of. So I sold, I know part of your experience was door to door sales. I've done that. I've done hardcore sales. I've sold everything. But after college, went into corporate media sales, and of course, type A overachiever who wanted validation and praise really badly. I did whatever it took to be at the top of the leaderboard in that position. So I would get 4 hours of sleep a night. I would burn the candle at both ends, like run my body into the ground. And I found myself, Jesse, in my mid-20s with this life that I thought was going to make me happy. I was married. I had a 6-figure corporate career, a nice house, the BMW, active social life, but nobody knew how much I hated myself and was struggling on the inside. No one knew I was still struggling with the eating disorder, and that I was in, even though I had money, I was in constant fear and anxiety of it going away. That the man I was married to at the time was a recovering alcoholic, and there was a lot of abuse in our relationship. And so one of the blessings of this part of my life was because I had really long car drives to go visit customers, because I was doing outside sales, selling these media packages. And I would have to drive for a few hours at a time. I hated the silence of being alone with my thoughts during those car drives. And so I discovered podcasts. I was like, I got to have something to listen to. So I just stumbled upon podcasts. And I had never, I don't know how I found, I no doubt serendipity, right? It always happens for us. I stumbled into personal development podcasts. And I was like, oh my gosh, like we grew up in a very intellectual household. I was never taught any of this stuff, that I could literally change all of it if I wanted to. And so I got hooked on these concepts of personal development. And right before I turned 28, 28's always been a really magic number for me. I was born on the 28th, special things happen on it. It's a special number. And before I turned 28, I said, I am not available. I don't know what's on the other side of making a lot of changes in my life, but I'm not willing to let this one year, at least on this go round on the planet, this 128th year be like the rest of them were. And so I started going on this journey of releasing everything that I had built up around me up until that point, thinking that it was what I needed to do to be happy. And I got a divorce. I left the marriage. I was petrified of what the judgment would be on the other side. But I did that, and it wasn't easy or clean, but it was what was needed. I left my corporate job to go out on my own as an entrepreneur and start a sales coaching business. Finally spoke up and shared with a mentor that I was struggling with the eating disorder, and got help and healing for that. And life started to transform really fast. And some pretty miraculous things happened along the way. And one of them was just last year, but I'll pause. I'd love to share more about that because I've learned a lot of lessons, but I'll pause there. Do you want me to go into that? Should I pause? Like, you tell me.
Yeah, no, I'd love to actually dive into the 17-year battle that you had, because I think that a lot of people suffer in silence, and a lot of people don't feel like they can reach out to people because they don't want to be a burden. They don't want to be judged, as you just stated. Like, people just a lot of times shell up, and they feel like they have nowhere to turn. And a lot of times people get into some dark places and feel like they can't get themselves out. So I just want to talk about that journey a little bit in terms of when you started. What did it look like, the process of what was going on, and then like your trials and tribulations for that 17-year period, and how you actually were able to get yourself out of it?
Yeah, gosh, that's a great question, because I think whether it's an eating disorder, whether it's alcoholism, whether it's pornography, like whatever it is, it's all suppressing our feelings that we don't want to deal with. And that was very much my own experience. And I was trying to control everything on the outside, which for me became my image, because that was so much of what I've been interested in growing up. Because I thought, if I can just look a certain way, then I'll be untouchable. Then I'll be happy. Then I'll feel good enough. And of course it never works like that. But yeah, it was tough. It was very tough. I think the biggest, no one can do this for you. Like, if that's where someone is right now, and maybe it's not as extreme, maybe it's more extreme. But I think the biggest thing that I've learned is no one is going to release you from that but you. And you just have to make the decision. You just have to make the decision at a certain point that you're not available to live life like that anymore. And even though you don't know what's on the other side, there's a great quote, and I don't know who said it, but it's, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek.
Yep.
And for me, that cave that I feared to enter was vocalizing it and telling someone that I was struggling with it, because I built up this persona of like, oh, Elyse always has it together, and she's got, like, that was very important to me, my quote unquote perfect image. But what I realized was I didn't have to tell everybody. I had to tell one person who I trusted, which at that point I told a woman who was coaching me on some other mindset things. And what I found, Jesse, was in the moment of just vocalizing it, I took my power back over it. And the healing was actually, it was pretty fast after that. And I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, I did not have to deal with it for that long. But vocalizing it and then having somebody else's perspective who could look at it and say, well, it's not really actually about the food, because it's never about the thing we're addicted to. It's always about other stuff. Um, it was fast healing from there. So that's what I would say to someone who's maybe in that spot, is like, say it out loud, like tell someone, because the moment you do, you take back your power over it and it no longer owns you.
Yep. Yep. I've been
Yeah.
doing some EFT tapping and some inner
Mm.
child work recently. And, just giving feelings and emotions, naming them, and things that I hadn't really, that I brushed under the rug or I thought were no big deal, that I've actually had time to process now, 20 something years later, and realize how powerful and impactful they were and how much trauma they've caused. Right. And these types
Mm.
of, I don't want to call it disorder, but disorders, addictions, the labels people give these, basically people are in pain and they're trying to at least cover up the pain and or feel good. And that's where addiction, a lot of times comes from, or obsessive compulsive, type of things. And um, I can speak to that because, I did drugs for a couple of years in my life, and I was definitely, I didn't think about it, up until the last couple of years doing different types of therapies, but I thought I had a pretty good childhood. But when I look back on it through some therapy, and I was like, there's no way I could have had a good childhood. I mean, my dad was a
Mm.
junkie. My mom was very disciplinarian, used to say, go pick a belt when it was time to get punished, kind of thing. And
Mm.
she was, I think she was, had some other things she was dealing with. But, for me, I looked at it and I was like, there's no way I could have had a good childhood. I grew up on the beach, near the beach. So I thought that was great. And, I had some friends and played sports and stuff. But when I really look at all the nuances and the different things that have happened, I'm like, damn, so I had a lot of work to do. And the processing, and even just for people that are listening, like you talked about, like giving that emotion or feeling a name, and like taking your power back and addressing it, and not trying to hide it, cover it up, and the strength that gives you, and also the healing that gives you right away. And that's something that I've learned. And so I want to talk a little bit about the mechanism, or the mode of what you were actually doing. So was it a purging thing? Like what was it that you were doing, and how was it making you feel in the moment? And how did you physically, like, and mentally stop doing it?
Yeah, gosh, that's a great question. So I was anorexic. That was my experience. I was mostly that. It got really bad when I was in my mid-teens and got down to, I don't know, like 80 something pounds.
Can you explain what that
Um,
means to people that might not know?
yeah, totally. It's just, you're super food restrictive. So I got really obsessive about how many calories I was eating every day. And I would know like the calories in a grape, the calories in this. And then
Even
I
that
went,
young, even in your
oh
teen?
yeah, very, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was
Wow.
like probably 13 through 15 was the worst.
Wow.
Um, because I was also type A, which a lot of people, and it's men and women who experience this, who experience eating disorders, they may identify, it's not everyone, but a lot that I've encountered, and I did this too, identify with like perfectionism,
Yeah.
very type A overachiever. Like if I could lose 1 pound this week, then I could lose 2 pounds next week. So it's
Mhm.
always like
Yeah.
pushing. I did some compulsive exercising too. I mean, it was the whole, I really look back at it as such a blessing, because now I've reconnected with my body and learned how powerful the body is.
Yes.
And it's such a beautiful tool and instrument, but you have to be so disconnected from your body to be able to do that to it, to be able to starve it, to be able to like push it into the ground with exercise when you've eaten, 200 calories that day.
Mm.
Um, and the biggest thing that helped was when I told that mentor, that coach, that I was struggling with it. And this book might be helpful for anybody who's on that journey too. There's a book she gave me called, I think it's Eating by the Light of the Moon or Eating Under the Light of the Moon, but it helped me understand where the real issues came from, which was that it was my emotions, which again, I'd cut them all off. I thought emotions were wrong.
Mm.
I was like, I don't feel it, just, be strong and restrict and diet. And so that book really shines light specifically for women who struggle in that area of, growing up. If you pick up on things going on in your household that you don't know how to verbalize, tension between parents, fighting, arguing. Well, I mean, it's like people, right? Everyone has something going on in their household. We're all people, and no one's perfect, and we don't expect that. But if you don't know how to verbalize it and you stuff and suppress it, you start to cut off your instincts. You start to look for control elsewhere. So it was an understanding. It was like, it wasn't about the food anymore. I finally understood what it was. And I started, that allowed me just a little bit in that moment. I read that book in one night after we did an intensive session. I read that book in one night.
Mm.
I remember the next day, I don't think I've ever talked about this on a podcast, but I was so excited about just the idea of falling back in love with my body and myself, because I'd hated it for so long. And like, not doing exercise to punish myself, but exercising for fun, that I just remember I got this inspiration to like look up a belly dancing video on YouTube.
Oh yeah.
And I was in a hotel room because I'd gone to North Carolina to meet with her and work with her. And I remember doing this belly, like just shaking it all over this hotel room, like belly dancing, feeling so free, feeling finally, I wasn't a supermodel. It didn't matter. I felt excited again about who I was and the body I was given, and learning that I wasn't wrong for feeling things. And that was, it makes me emotional to think about it. I haven't really thought about it in a long time. That was a beautiful healing. And it's been a healing journey since then, like the past 7 years.
Yes,
But it's been really beautiful.
it's incredible the power that we have. We are self healers. We are self creators, and this is a message that I received. I was in Peru in March of this year, 2021, and I was working with ayahuasca, which is known as the mother. It's the divine feminine plant medicine, and you get all these downloads or insights, and just basically come back with this new way to operate in the world. And one of the insights I got during the journey was that I'm a healer, I'm a creator, and I'm powerful. So I'm a powerful creator, I'm a powerful healer. And you would have told me that 15, 20 years ago, I would have been like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, what does that even mean? And through my own journey, similar to yours, where I've had to do some self-healing, I had to do a lot of inner work, I had to have coaching and mentors and fall down on my face to get up kind of thing. I've learned that I am, and I've seen the power that we have. I've seen the power that I can emanate from these things that I've done. And it seems like you've been through that process as well, where you reclaimed your power. You also healed yourself. Like, you didn't have to go to, there's nothing wrong with doctors. We were actually talking about doctors before we jumped on, and holistic doctors, and the ones that we feel are doing a good job in the world. And, they have their place, but at the same time, we're our own doctor. And it's, things like food is medicine, eating foods that are vibrant and rich and whole foods, things that'll make us feel better, and eating right before we actually have to go to a doctor, or taking care of our body, right? You talk about getting a little bit weird, right? And like finding a belly dancing video, and this is something that's been going on for ages. This is almost like ecstatic dance. Ecstatic dance is something that we do, and one of our collectives we have called the Vortexes of Light, where we get a bunch of high functioning hippies, people that want to commune with each other, people that want to learn together, people that want to travel and do things, explore together, and they also want to heal. And we did this ecstatic dance back in May at a retreat that we led, and it was ecstatic dance. Have you ever tried it before?
I haven't, but I think I would love it.
It's incredible.
I would love it. Yeah.
It's a room of people dancing by themselves, and then eventually, like that whole cliche, like dance like nobody's watching. Yeah. It's a room of people doing that, and then all of a sudden this beautiful like merging happens, and people just start dancing with each other and just letting loose and losing all inhibition, and like nothing crazy, like not like Sodom and Gomorrah, but just like losing all inhibition. So like, stop giving a shit what people think. If you move weird, if you act weird, like no one cared, right? And it sounds like you had your own little ecstatic dance with the belly dance. I mean, that was a beautiful experience.
It was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. Yeah. And this stuff, I love that you do the ecstatic dance, because I think whatever the modality is, like I've done shamanic shaking quite a bit, which has been super powerful. I went to a mastermind back in May with this group of women who have 7-figure businesses, and they're all, it's funny. You talk about the inner child healing stuff, but we danced together. We also like threw things and hit things and beat pillows and did a lot of anger release. And you imagine this like dark room with very women who you would look at on the outside and be like, they've got it together. They've got great businesses. They've got families, kids. We're like cursing, throwing things against the walls, like beating pillows, because that stuff gets buried, and you got to let it out, whether it's something negative or whether it's something positive, like conjuring that beautiful emotion in your body through the ecstatic dance. It's all so powerful.
I know, it's incredible. Yeah. There's different things for everybody, right? There's breath work, there's ecstatic dance, there's anything, energy work, there's plant medicines, it's yoga, all sorts of different things that you can really tap into another level of consciousness, but it's whatever works for you, and put those tools in your tool belt. And then eventually, like you said, you can, instead of like letting out just, negative, what we call it negative emotions, you let the beauty out into the world. You give happiness, you radiate joy, you radiate love, and now you're operating in a different frequency, and people are lifted up by your presence. And now you're a vortex of light is what we call ourselves, but you're someone who's this powerful, energetic being that's emanating love, light, and truth into the world, which there is no higher vibration on this plane. It's just if everyone could be there, which would be, I guess, utopia. If everyone could be there, that would be the goal.
That's so true. Gosh, that's so true. And I think one of the things that I would love to pause on for a moment, because we talk about parents, right? And growing up. And I'm always very mindful of, like, I never want to make parents wrong, because oftentimes I'm a parent. I know you're a parent, right? And our parents were always doing the best they could with what they had. Many times they go through even more challenging circumstances that many of us we're not even aware of they went through. But I think one of the perspectives that's been most helpful for me is that, and we talked about this because you came on She Sells Radio too. When we come to this planet, at least my belief system is, we're here to create something with our lives, right? And they're often, to know what we need to create, we have to experience the opposite of that. We have to experience contrast, as Abraham Hicks calls it. Or so there's a beautiful book, a children's book that I love, called The Little Soul in the Sun, which I highly recommend for anyone who's got some unresolved issues with parents or guardians. But what it basically teaches is that there are souls here put on this planet. It's like everyone is truly love and light at our core.
Yep.
But when you came down to this planet, you might have said, I want to experience what it's like to give forgiveness. I want to experience what it's like to, to heal. And so to experience that, you have to have people who give you something to forgive or something to heal from. And when we can learn to see the divine nature in everyone around us, our parents included, or whoever raised us, then it helps us to say, you know what, I experienced that, whatever that trauma was, so that it's something I can heal from, so I can go out and live my full purpose. Like, you and I would not be having this conversation right now if we both hadn't experienced challenges and trauma. But oftentimes we let them own us because we're not willing to look at them and do the healing work. But the freedom is always on the other side.
No
So I just think that's so important to, like, never, we don't make our parents wrong for it, but just to look at, well, how is it happening for me, and how can I take what I need to, so I can go out and live the beautiful life I want to create now.
So powerful. And I
Yeah.
think that, at least from my perspective, from what I've seen from my own, ancestors up and, coming down all the way down to my parents, and then me, and then other people that I've taken a look at too. It does seem that each generation tries to do a little bit better or something different than the previous one before them. Right. So like, if there was an abusive parent, if there was, an addicted parent, or whatever it was, the next generation a lot of times tries to, I feel like, for the most part, tries to correct that trauma. And there's this amazing, I guess, I don't even know if it's an awareness, but there's this kind of ongoing communication, I think, between all people on earth right now, where there's an awareness of healing generational trauma, and taking things that are in people's families, and like, now it's up to us to, because I didn't hear about anything about generational trauma, like, until, you don't hear about these things. I feel like we're coming into a new frequency where, like, there's a lot of people that are being given the tools to be able to share how to raise the vibration on earth, and help people become better parents, and better business people, and better friends, and better whatever it is that you're into. And so, going back to the parents and generational trauma, it's up to us. Like, we own that. We have to say, they did the best they could. It may not have been great. It may have been terrible, but now it's up to me to heal that shit. So I put a post up a couple of weeks ago saying, being the one called to heal generational trauma, great. And I had like this really funny face on there, but it's
I need to share that, because that's literally, this is a kind of out there, but it was fun. I had a guy read my colors and my aura, and he was like, "You're called to heal generational trauma."
I appreciate that responsibility.
Perfect.
But also, what you're saying outside of that, I love is our souls. I believe our souls chose to be here.
Yes.
in our souls, for whatever reason. Like you said, they wanted to experience forgiveness, they wanted to experience love, they wanted to experience whatever it is. And then once we have that awareness, now it's up to us to take those couple things, generational trauma, our soul's journey, and really make the most of it. And so who knows what the next spin's going to look like, right? Like what body we choose, what time we choose, whatever it is, and who knows what we choose to be a part of. But at least now we have this awareness moving forward while we're here to decide what we want. So shifting gears back to what we were talking about, there's a couple of topics I wanted to get on, and personal development. So personal development is something where I've been in personal development one way or another for a while, and it can be one of those things where it becomes almost like an addiction. Like a lot of people that have to go to this event, they have to go see, just throwing names out there, they have to go see Tony Robbins, or they have to go see this person. They just get stuck on this train, but they never actually integrate what they're learning and or grow. They just continue to kind of follow the excitement, which there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, you do want to level up. And so can you speak to your journey with personal development? How has it been? Like, who was like some of the, I think you said podcasts was something that kind of caught your ear, but who were the podcasters? Who were the personal development people you followed? And what were some of the things that you took from them?
Totally. Yeah. And if it's okay, I'll share a story of something that I think speaks to what you were just talking about, which is you can hear it and hear it and hear it, and it can be very feel good. But if your life isn't shifting to reflect what you're learning, then there's something that you're not taking ownership of and implementing in your life. So I mean, from who I follow and who's been the most impactful, it's shifted over the years. I think right now, some of the people that I just love following was, I mean, this is like old school, but I love Bob Proctor. I have two hall passes in this life. One is Bob Proctor, and the other is Joe Dispenza. My husband and I joke, we're like, those are
okay. We're talking about the same hall pass here, are we? Great.
In a total non-weird way. He's like my spirit animal. I love the man. So, and then I'm a big Abraham Hicks person too. So all of that. But I'll share this story because this for me was like, it was even hard to believe how it happened in my own life, but I think it speaks to what happens when we don't just learn, but we apply. Yeah. If that makes sense. So I'll kind of fast forward. So up until last year in my life, life was really good. Like got remarried, had our son, beautiful, like everything was really, really good. But I kept bumping up against a threshold in terms of what I was making. And so I'm going to share numbers here just for context, because I think it'll help people understand. So, I'd done a lot of healing, was building from a whole and grounded energy, I was having success in my business, but for whatever reason, it was like, it didn't seem to matter what I did. I could make low six figures in a year, like 100,000, 150. And that was it. Yeah. And I did this exercise. So I'm big in coaching. I always have multiple coaches. And my coach last year took me through this exercise that I thought was going to be very innocent. It was like a random Tuesday. And she said, I want to take you through this dream lives exercise. And I thought, sure, I'm game for anything. I'm coachable, I'll do it. And she said, I want you to think about if you could have 5 dream lives right now, what would they be? And you can think back to things that you wanted to do when you were a little girl. You can think back to things you would love to do now, but you just don't see how it would incorporate in your life. And there was something about it was just something about the timing when we did it. I don't know what it was, but I was super open. And I was like, all right, brain, tell me what my dream lives are. I started writing and journaling, and these things came up like open a sanctuary for healing for animals and people struggling with addiction issues, because that's part of my background. Yeah. Pay for my husband to go to medical school, like retire him, pay for him to go to medical school. Become a philanthropist, be a world famous singer, like all of these things. And I felt stupid writing them down. They felt so silly writing them down. But I remember afterwards, Jesse, I looked at that list and I started just thinking about people who were actually living those lives. And I started just Googling like people who run sanctuaries and some of the top singers in our planet. I just started looking at them and I was like, a lot of them are younger than me. A lot of them come from more challenging situations than I do. And I realized I'd been waiting for someone to come give me permission to live life at the level I wanted to live. And it was just this aha moment where I said, okay, like I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make these dream lives manifest into a reality for myself. Because the level I was playing at, like low six figures, does not open an animal sanctuary. at least not easily. It doesn't pay for husband to retire and go to medical school. And so I said, all right, God, like, I'm just going to listen, whatever I need to do, I'm going to do, tell me. So like the next week, I get this very strong download. You need to hire this particular woman as a coach. And it was a woman who works with moms to help them become 7-figure business owners. I was not a super fan of this woman. I loosely listened to her podcast, didn't pay a lot of attention. And actually, in fact, she triggered me with a lot of the stuff she talked about. But I was like, okay.
Probably when you say triggered, was there some challenging, like some things maybe
well, it was the way in which she owned herself. Like she showed up very unapologetically. She claimed how great she was. She claimed, and that triggered who I was at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was like, I don't even like her that much, but okay. And so of course, the next day I'm listening to her podcast and she says, just happens to mention she's got a spot open for one-on-one coaching.
Yep.
Of course. And so I say, all right, universal play. So I fill out the application and hop on a call with her. It's all like, yes, 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 this is perfect. And then she tells me that the investment to work with her is $50,000 for 6 months. I was like, like, I don't know, universe, if you understood when I said I'll do anything, like this is half of what I made last year. Yeah. But I couldn't ignore the nudge and I couldn't ignore the call, Jesse, that was what I was supposed to do to make this next level life unfold. Yep. And so after about a week of just grappling with the decision and fighting it and pushing it, I was finally like, okay, like I surrender. What do we need to do? Credit card, savings, scrape it together, put down the deposit. It was the most butt clenching moment of my life, we will say. Hit order on the coaching deposit with her. And I went into 3 weeks of sheer panic of what I had just done.
Wow.
Did I just put our family in financial ruin? I don't even know how I'm going to pay this back. I don't even like her that much. Why am I doing this? But part of what happened in that period, Jesse, was it forced me to come face to face with all of my demons, which I knew it would. That's actually why I did it. It almost didn't matter what sort of coaching I received from her. I knew that to be the woman who believes that she's worth investing that amount in and is willing to show up at that level for herself, I had to transform. I had to become the woman who brings in 7 figures plus, who can actually do these things I want to do.
Yep.
And went through a very intense, very fast healing process of every limiting belief I'd ever had around money, around myself, around self-worth. I did everything that terrified me. I sang publicly on social media after I hadn't done it after. This is another part of my story we don't have time for, but I'd been sexually assaulted in college and I stopped singing after that. I sang publicly again on social media, launched a new program that I was petrified to launch because I had limiting beliefs about whether anyone would buy this new group program. And in 6 weeks, I went from having $100,000 years to $100,000 months.
Wow.
And we just retired my husband this past week.
Awesome.
He's getting ready to go to medical school. What I learned from that, and again, I share those numbers just for context because it was like, it happened so fast that I realized I was the only one who'd been holding myself back all of those years.
Yep.
Because I had done the feel good personal development. I was like, this feels great to listen to Bob in the mornings, but am I doing it?
Yeah.
And so that's what I share that because I think for all of us, there's something that we're terrified to do from all the personal development we're listening to, that when you let yourself do it, it will be scary. It will feel like you're having an out of body experience. It will be petrifying, but everything you want is on the other side of that.
Yeah. Everything, your best life's on the other side of fear.
It's exactly it.
You said this earlier about going into the cave, and there's this whole hero's journey, dark night of the soul. Like there's a lot of that tied in there. But when you know that you have to go into the cave, and the cave has the answer, but you want to go in the cave, it's like the obstacle is the way. Like the thing that's holding you back is the thing that you need to be doing. And as long as it's like a good thing, right? Like not, you don't, if drinking's holding you back, don't drink more. But, but like if you know that if coaching is, and specifically this one person is the key, but you have this hesitation, sometimes that's the reason, is because like that you need that little bit of pain for growth. Pain's a great teacher, right? And so you immediately see change by betting on yourself, investing in yourself, and being a little freaked out for 3 weeks. Like, oh my goodness, did I just ruin my family? Yeah. But you learn pretty quickly that this $100,000, $150,000 a year life turned into $100,000 a month, which is, for anybody listening, I'm not a financial planner, but this is about 12 times what you were making before, right? I am a financial planner. So
Simple
12 times
math.
what you were
Yeah.
making before, which is a whole different world to live in. And now you're coming from a place of wholeness. You're coming from a place of authenticity. You're in abundance. You're in alignment with what you want. And so for the listeners, what changed outside of, so the initial first change was the biggest one, the belief and kind of that moment of pain. But then from there, what were some of the core tenets that were implemented into your life that you could go from 100K a year to 100K a month?
Absolutely. I love that question. And this is part of why I love what we do now at She Sells, because it's about this. It's this concept of selling from a place of wholeness,
Yep.
not reaching and grabbing because I think the money and the clients are going to make me feel better, which is how I showed up for a lot of my life. I think what happened, Jesse, and for anyone who's had an experience where you just surrendered everything, because I had to do it in that moment. I was like, here's the money. I don't know how it's going to come back. And I'm petrified of what I'm doing, but I'm letting go of all control because what little money I had was making me feel safe.
Yes.
Um, I had to I had to do a few things. One was I had to go inside and look at every limiting belief I had around what I was worthy of and what was possible for me and whether I could trust myself or not. Because in that moment, I didn't tell, aside from my husband, because I had to tell him I needed to use some of our savings, actually all of our savings. Um, I I didn't tell anyone because I knew they would say it was a terrible idea.
Yep.
But I had to learn that I could listen to myself and my own intuition and guidance that I, for whatever reason, this thing made no sense to do, but I needed to do it. And that's part of learning to reconnect to your body, which is part of what I teach my clients now, which is that your body will always tell you. It'll tell you when you're thinking a limiting belief, which is just a lie. You're giving unhelpful meaning to a situation because you feel bad.
Yep.
You feel anxiety, overwhelm, fear. And that, so it's literally its way of telling you that you're not thinking in alignment with your higher self and your truth. The other big piece that I had to heal, and most of the women who I coach now also have to heal this, is feeling worthy of more.
Oh yeah.
And that's a big one because
Huge.
that's, yeah, our boy Joe, like I said, he's one of my other hall passes. Like he says, the universe only gives you what you think you deserve,
Yep.
which is so true. And so you can say, I want this all day long. But if there's part of, which why I love you do the inner child healing, I do it too. If there's part of you that doesn't feel worthy of it, you're not going to get it. You're going to reject it. You're going to push it back. So I had to practice in that time period, feeling worthy of more coming in and thinking for the 7-figure version of me, how does she show up? How does she think about money? How does she feel? Does she feel worried and constricted and anxious, or does she feel really abundant and really excited about the impact she's making and about her life? And I had to practice being her before she actually happened.
Yep.
But what happened was you learn to feel so good along the way and along the journey that when the money came, it was almost like, oh, that's cool. Like, and I hate to minimize it that way, but it was like, oh, that's cool, great. Because you have to feel good first. You have to feel good first. And then you're a match for everything you want. I know you know this. I know you teach this, but it was
Yes.
an almost surreal experience of like, wow, this is really what it is.
The real prize is the healing, and then
Yes.
the journey is the prize. And then it's funny because everything starts falling into place. Connections, money, opportunities, just everything just kind of starts happening. But it's because you've already healed, you've done the work, and you're open to these possibilities. And going back to Dr. Joe, I love Dr. Joe, and eventually we'll get out to one of his like week-long retreats because I've seen some of his stuff. I had some people that I'm connected with that have gone to these retreats, and they've sent me some of his meditations, like Kaleidoscope and all these different things. And I'm just enamored by this type of work. And I've been affected by quantum healing in a different way. I know he works in the quantum and like pulling things from the quantum and being able to manifest it and having the like feeling what it feels like, seeing what it is, and like calling it into reality. I'm familiar with some of his work, but have you been able to go to any of his retreats, Dr.
I
Joe?
haven't yet, which I'm dying to do. I bought his course. I've read all his books. They sell out so fast
Oh yeah.
that so I'm that it will happen some way, somehow it will, I know it will happen.
Oh yeah.
But not yet. I'm dying to get there
I
though.
wanted to go back. There was a
Yeah.
point that you wanted to make, but you're like, let's just hold here. And I don't know if you.
Well, and that was, yeah. So that was really, that was kind of the other part of the story that I thought might be helpful is what we just shared, which
Okay.
is that the quantum leap can come quickly in your
Yes.
life when you do that inner work and that healing.
Beautiful, beautiful. And
So
so,
yeah,
and so,
yeah.
what in your businesses and your podcast, talk a little bit about the impact that they're having and what they're doing for you personally, like what they've done to open up opportunities, and what do you do in your business? What do you do in your podcast? Talk a little bit about both of those.
Oh, thank you for asking. It's It's amazing to me to see. I coach some men privately, but I serve primarily women with my brand. Obviously, she sells. So, um, to see what's happening as women say yes and open up to no longer playing small, no longer making themselves wrong for what they want. I'll share just one quick story, because I think it speaks to the interconnectedness of everything. I've got a beautiful client, named Rita in Norway, and when she came into the program, my group program, her goal, she had a number that was, I don't even remember how much it was, but it was like something over $200,000 she wanted to bring in 90 days, and she didn't know why.
Yeah.
She was like, "That's what I want to bring in," and never brought in that amount in her business before. But she was very open. She's got a beautiful soul. She's got a child he has a disorder where he was supposed to die by the age of 7, and she's
Mm.
really pioneered a lot of medicine in this space. And he's the oldest living person alive with this disorder. He's in his, I think, early 20s.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
so
instead of
she's,
7, he's in his early 20s now.
yeah, it's pretty incredible the work she's done, but her whole life has been focused on her son and helping him live.
Yeah.
Um, and so she really came into this too with like, I'm ready to receive and I'm ready to start to create a life for myself as well as still caring for her beautiful son, Benjamin. And she had that energy we're talking about here, of that surrender, of that openness, of just being in full, just ready to be dazzled by what was brought in.
Yeah.
Launched a new program, brought in like $65,000 in 5 days with a simple email she sent to some selected clients, just inviting them with a heartfelt video to come into this new program.
Beautiful.
Sold a piece of property for another 120. And then here's the part that she ended up making $270,000 in 90 days. But here's the part that I think is most powerful and where the other money came from. There was a family in India who reached out to her on LinkedIn like 2 months into the program, and they had a son, Kushal, who was born with the same disorder as Benjamin. The treatment for this is $1 million a year. And this,
Wow.
yeah, and this family's like, we don't know what to do. Like his health he was less than a year old. His health was deteriorating. They're in panic about what to do. And this beautiful woman she starts organizing a fundraiser and pulling in collective, like doctors and healers and the best leaders in the space across the world, raises something around $100,000 for this little boy in the span of a couple weeks. He's in treatment right now. His body's starting to heal and recover. And she messaged me the other day and she was like, Elyse, when I set that goal of over 200, I didn't know what it was for. She said, but I knew I needed to bring it in. And what I've learned through this and what's so powerful is the interconnectedness that when we step up and say, for her saying yes to herself and getting coaching and being in this program and making more money so she could buy a convertible that seats two. So she's just, she's zipping along and having fun in her life, but being open to how what she does can better others. This little boy now has a chance and he's starting to heal, and more money than she even thought was going to came in, but it came in different ways. And that's part of what's fun, is it does come in different ways than we expect, but it was so beautiful because she chose to just surrender and get out of the way and allow. So that's just one of my favorite examples of what happens with some of the women I get to work with and serve and meet, through what we do. So yeah, She Sells is the company. We've got our group coaching program is called the 10K Club. It's my signature program. And then She Sells Radio. People can get weekly podcasts like this. You're actually, at the time of this recording, you're going to be live tomorrow, which is so exciting.
Can't wait. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anything else for the rest of the 2021 that you're looking forward to? And, what are you working on, or what's fun
Yeah.
coming up? I know you were talking about something before jumping on, so I didn't know if that was news that you could share.
Yeah,
But
totally. Yeah. So we are in the just journey of, surrendering and getting excited for what's next. So my husband, Jason, he's been a respiratory therapist for, I should know how long, 12, 13 years, a long time, has really felt called to go into, DO school, which is Doctor of Osteopathy. So I'm a more holistic MD. And so we're going to be uprooting our lives here in Atlanta and moving up to Maine sometime in the next 9 months. So I'm excited for that. I've moved every year up until the past few years. And so I'm excited to like have a shift and a change, but I'm going to be writing a book, launching some new things. But I think the biggest thing I'm excited about is continuing to practice being a woman who's in full surrender in every area of her life. And I think that's where the greatest joy comes. That's where the surprises come. That's what I get to practice every day, is just being open and being in surrender. So that's, who knows what's going to come, but I'm excited about that. So
looking forward to
yeah.
seeing the journey unfold and our connection growing. And before you head out of Atlanta, we got to connect and meet up and see what we can do to change the world together. But thank you so much for being on the show today. And let me be one of the first, obviously the first listener and viewer to see this, but to say thank you so much for who you are. And we can't wait for the next conversation.
Thank you, Jesse.
Take care.